Good evening, everybody. My name is Jordan. If you're joining us for the first time, welcome to our Tuesday night podcast. We do this every Tuesday. Sometimes we do something pretty typical, which is I ask questions, and Pastor Ford is here. He's the pastor here at the church in San Carlos, the Door Christian Fellowship Church in San Carlos, and I ask questions. He answers them. Tonight, I'm asking the questions again, but we have a special guest. As you can see, Pastor Ford has not grown by a foot. He's out of town, and so I got an opportunity to do something a little special tonight. And joining me tonight is Francois Hurstel. He can say hi now, so it switches over.
Hello, everybody.
We're gonna get this mic thing down.
Okay, hello. There we go.
There we go. All right, yeah, maybe move just a little bit closer to them.
Okay.
Okay, so tonight topic is Catholic to convert. I have kind of a unique opportunity with Francois because Francois is not only a member of our church, but he's also an immigrant. He immigrated to the U.S. And he also converted from Catholicism to Christianity. But you made that move before you came to the U.S., right?
Correct.
And so how old were you when you came to the U.S.?
I was about, I would say 17, 18 years old when I first came. I think it was in 2009 when I first came to the U.S.
Okay. And so tonight, I'm pretty much going to be giving people an opportunity to get to know Francois because he's a convert. And I asked him specifically, were you a practicing Catholic? Because a lot of people are Catholic and they, other than what they did when they were, baptized at birth, you know what I mean? There's no real connection with their practice. But I asked Francois specifically if he was a practicing Catholic, and he answered yes. And so I wanted to take people into, what it's like converting from a religion to Christianity. And the reason I was inspired for this was we go out in the streets, we talk to people, and we invite people to become Christians. That's really what we're doing. We're looking for converts. We are trying to make converts, introducing people to Jesus, who he is, and introducing them to a real God and not just a religious practice. And a lot of people reject Christ because of their cultural background and because of how they were raised. And so when we talk to them about Christianity, what we're doing is we're confronting how they were raised. And in a lot of ways, that's a very uncomfortable thing to do. You're telling me to leave everything I was raised to know, and here I am, my 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, and I've been doing this my entire life, and you want me to just drop all of that and become a Christian, which sounds absurd from man's standpoint. But when you think about it from the standpoint of who God is and who Jesus is and what the Bible really means in reality, there's a lot you can learn from somebody who's made that jump. And so I want to jump right into it again. As always, we want you to ask questions. We try to keep it on topic tonight, but if you have something off topic, maybe we can skirt that until the end, or you can fill them in anytime you want, and I'll save those for the end. We can kind of jump to a few things that might be on your mind. Like I said, tonight's a bit unique. We're just going to get to know Francois and his testimony. And so describe to me, I guess, first question is, what was it like before you became a Christian? What does a practicing Catholic look like for you growing up in Fiji and having a family who's devout to that?
Yeah. Well, so Fiji is similar to any other Catholic countries like Mexico, Spain. They have a very rich history of Catholicism, and so I was baptized as a little kid. I did confirmation, I did communion, did the whole ritual. We got certificates for it, and as far as I know, growing up, this is what we were taught. It was like, okay, you go. I was an altar boy in the thing. I went to Catholic school, both in primary and secondary school, and so everything, for my entire, from when I was born till around about 17, I would say 14, 15 years old was Catholic. And so it's funny, as I was thinking about it, it was, you don't really get to go to church and then hang out with the priest afterwards, that thing. It's kind of like, the priest is up there, and then you guys, the congregation is down here. And so We go to mass, but everything, as I'm thinking about it, that we learn is from everyone else in church. And so when everyone goes to mass and what they do and stuff like that, we just kind of mimicked and copied, like almost like a simpler version of discipleship, where you just like, okay, this is what everyone does. Let me just, kind of go with the flow. But it was kind of weird because it wasn't just like, hey, I get to learn what you do on Sunday. When you following people, what they're doing on Saturday, and right after church they would go to a drinking party, or everyone goes around. And so I tried even to distance myself. It's like, this is weird. Like even I at that age knew, like, okay, well, I was not an adult, so I was like, okay, I don't go and do those things, but these are the people that are going to Catholic church, so I guess this is what we do as Catholics. We go to mass, and then we just go do whatever we want after mass. And so that was kind of growing up. It was like that.
So what did you think about like God? Like what was your thought on God at that age? Do you remember like thinking about God, believing in God? Did you think that the God of the Bible was real, the God of the Catholic Church was real?
Yeah, I definitely, believed in God and believed in Jesus. That's what we were taught. It wasn't, as if, now where I can just sit down and learn with the Bible. I probably learn a lot more. We picked up things over the years and years. So it was a long process of learning. It was like, we did, the carrying of the cross, and Palm Sundays, we bring all the palms, and like, oh, what's this story about? And so, that year you learn that. So it was a very slow process of learning, but over, 14, 15 years is a lot of things come up during subjects of like, hey, this is what God is, and this is what Jesus is. But it was just very vague. Is whatever the priest would preach on the mass on that Sunday is kind of all you get, because there's no really like reading your Bible in the Catholic Church. It's kind of like, hey, maybe you had a Bible if you did, and no one really read it. So it was just like, come to mass, do what other Catholics do, and listen to the priest, which most of the time he preached on like 4 to like 6 different texts, and that was the main text they kept repeating over and over again through the entire year. So you, to be honest, you wouldn't learn anything of the Bible if that was your only context of learning was through the. And I'm talking about, for those who are not familiar with the Catholic Church, is you don't go sit down for an hour and preach on the Bible. It's probably a 15-minute or a 10-minute segment of one text, and they talk about this text of how it reflects back to life, and then we go back into the whole ritual. So in Catholic, it's all about rituals. You come in, we stand up, sit down, we sing a song, we go communion, we do the sign of the cross, we get on our knees, we stand back up, we sit back down. It's like there's this whole ritual for an hour that we do, and the message is probably like a 5-minute clip inside of that. So not much, very, as I'm thinking about it, not much place for learning in that context.
So was this like your entire family was doing this, or were there other people in your family that did other things, or?
Yeah, exactly. So this is our entire family. So whoever we had at home at the time, there was a lot of people that were, going overseas or coming back. But yeah, me, my sister, everyone else at home, my dad, we all went, he's always made it very important. Mass, you need to be there on Sunday and stuff like that. So we just knew like, hey, we had to be there in mass.
Yeah.
And so that was important. Everything else, you can do whatever you want Monday through Saturday, but you better be there in mass. Coming to whether you come drunk or whatever, you need to be there in mass. That was just what everyone was taught.
Yeah. So where was your like first introduction to Christianity, and how you before you kind of became a Christian, how was like your introduction there?
Adding on to that, in Catholic church and then going to Catholic school, that's probably where we learned a little bit more of because we actually had a subject on learning a different text and the Bible and all that. But that was around when I was in high school. That's when I first was invited to one of our fellowship churches, which was doing Hell's Gates and Heaven's Flames concert. And so it was more just like, hey, this is concert, come check it out.
I think you mean Heaven's Gates, Hell's Flames.
It's
the other way around.
Maybe I said the opposite here. But yeah, so I went to one of those concerts, and that's when the first time I actually heard the gospel in its simplest form, in like a 5-minute segment of just like, hey, heaven is real. I said, yeah, I know heaven is real. Like, we've been taught this. Hell, yeah, I heard of hell. And we've also in Catholic learned of purgatory. And so I was like, okay, but we never really drew the lines of like, who is going to hell? Who's going to heaven? What's going to happen when you die? It's just like, hey, you just keep coming to mass and hopefully you do good enough, and then something when you get up into heaven, you'll check enough good boxes where God's like, hey, you were a Catholic, you made sure you made mass every single Sunday, so that's got to count for something, so yeah, make it into heaven. There was no like, okay, this is how you make it to heaven, this is how you won't make it to heaven and go to hell. And there was no clear lines.
So what was the thing that kind of pushed you in a direction to want to become a Christian? Like, it still sounds kind of interesting. Okay, maybe you just went to this new church and you learned something new. Okay, now go back to doing what I was doing. What made you want to become a Christian?
And in the beginning, I didn't even know what the difference was. I was like, Christian, oh, maybe that's just, another fancier way of saying Catholic. And I go back to my dad, it's like, hey, what's this Christian thing? It's like, oh, Catholics are Christians. And, we're just, this is the Roman version of the Christianity. I was like, oh, okay, cool. So I always thought, I was like, okay, I guess I'm a Christian as well.
Yeah.
And so, very vague explanations and maybe even more of a selfish type of reason. But that concept was the first time ever in my entire life where I was told, like I said, the clear gospel is like, this is heaven, this is hell. And directly looking at me, how are you living your life today, right now? Mm-hmm. If you were to die, what's going to happen? And then all of a sudden, like I would think anybody in their right mind just like all of a sudden feeling like, whoa, I'm going to hell. Because everything you're saying, I don't line up with this. It's like, I don't match up to what a person that's going to heaven is supposed to look like. And so if everything you're saying is real, and everything what I've heard over my years of Catholic, it sounds very, very the same, but I've never heard this part that I'm actually going to go to hell. I can maybe say a bunch of Hail Marys. So we have to say 50 Hail Marys, Our Fathers, all the stuff, and every year we cleanse our sins and we go to the priest and he'll forgive us of our sins, and we get to do that all over again. But it says no. This is, if you're living this type of life, you're living in sin, you're going to go to hell. It's that simple. And almost a selfish thing, like, I don't want to go to hell. So I was all like, hey, it's like, but there was more of like, a conviction, like I would say. It was like, all of a sudden, everything through my entire life of, 14, 15 years just flashed back through my eyes, and I just started crying and just like, no, I don't want this, and just making this sudden, just like someone saw me, it's like, hey, what's going on? Are you okay? Just tearing up. He said, yeah, I want this. If this is how you make it to heaven, I want this. And so going in and actually making that decision that very night, and just saying, I don't know what this means. I don't know what this means for, my church, Catholic. I just want to be make heaven my home. I want to be, I want to go make it to heaven. And so saying a prayer and actually making a decision that night was the first step.
It's interesting. You mentioned, because you've gone to kind of two extremes. You're talking about your Catholic experience, which sounded, and correct me if I'm wrong, but from what you're saying, it sounded very impersonal. It sounded very like just general. Everything is very general. Everything's very broad brushed, and as long as you're going through the traditions and stuff like that, you're doing okay. But there being no real connection between you and God other than just going to church and following the rituals. Whereas you show up to this concert, or you show up to this other church that starts making this like personal connection, as if God has an expectation for you personally, which sounds somewhat like what you're talking about, there being a difference there. Tell me about this, what became more personal after. So you became a Christian, and what started changing like right away? Maybe like take me into some of what were some of the struggles you faced? What were some of the kickbacks you faced? Were you just like, was your family expecting this? Oh yeah, Francois is he's a rebel. He's going to do what he's going to do. But how did your family respond?
Well, actually, I in my mind, I thought they would have been happy, because like, hey guys, I'm learning more about God. I'm reading the Bible. I'm studying this, and it says, I'm going to make heaven my home. It's like, hey, telling everybody, and all of a sudden, just the backlash. I was just like, no. We're Catholics. We don't. I was like, what does Catholic have to do with anything about this Bible? And so it was huge backlash. And so, like you said, I never thought about it, but like, in Catholicism, there is no real connection. You don't get to have a connection with God. It's more like you go through the priest. You have to go through the priest is your connection to God. You don't, unless you want to aspire to be a priest, which is not 99% of people they're not wanting to be priests. You're like, okay, that's, if you maybe want to have a close connection with God, you read your Bible, you do the priest, you set yourself aside, all that things, but nobody wants to do that. So our jobs, I guess, as lay people is just show up on Sunday. That was kind of the thing. We bring our statues of Mary, and we pray to Mary, and we pray to our statues of Jesus, and we carry around the community, and we have fellowships and all that stuff. But there was no aspiration to have a connection with God, because we were taught that not really taught that you can't have a connection, but it was just like implied that, hey, that's the priest's job.
Yeah.
You do your job and just sit and listen to the priest.
Yeah.
And so as when I made the decision, is all like, what, I can have a relationship with God. I can have a relationship with Jesus. He is the one that died for my sins, and I can actually, go straight to him. I don't have to go through a priest. I don't have to go say Hail Marys and do all of this this works in order to win salvation. It was just a gift that God had established for us. That blew my mind. And so first it was the backlash, and then second of all, it was I had to go back into my regular life. It wasn't like, hey, now all of a sudden I'm wearing a tie, I'm coming to church every single service on Sunday. No, after that I didn't even show up to church. I think it was a couple weeks, but that was always in the back of my mind, like, hey, you experience something real here. You experience this. And so every time I had to go back into my old life, and now I was aware of sin, actually, for the first time, I would say, in my life. I was conscious of sin. Like my conscience had actually just come alive after like 14, 15 years being dead, and just like, oh wow, I'm not supposed to do this because I'm sinning. Oh, I can't just be going and lying. I can't just be going and telling people like, directing them in wrong ways. I can't be just going out to parties with all my friends. It's like, this is wrong. This is sin. And for the first time, I'm actually like, no, it's okay. And they're just trying to push that conscience aside. It's like, no, it's like this can't be. It's just one night thing. It's like, how I've been going to Catholic 15 years. Like, how is that even going to compare? So that battle was in my mind for sure, each and every day with that personal connection with Jesus.
Yeah. And responsibility, apparently.
Yeah. Responsibility.
That's awesome. So you decided to become a Christian. How long after you decided to become a Christian did you come to the U.S.? You said you're about 15 when you...
Yeah, so it was about 2 more years after that.
Okay.
I would say, so 15, 16, 17, that's when I started to come to the U.S. And so along that time, it wasn't just like, hey, 2 years of like going to church. It was like, getting saved for the first time. And so it was showed up once a month. And then like, it was more of like the community that, because that's what I was used to in the Catholic Church. Like, hey, what's the community doing? They're going out here, or they went out to play rugby, or they went to play, sports. I went out to play sports with them. And then I just ended up at someone's house like, oh, by the way, church is tonight. Oh, I guess I'll go to church with them. And so it was more, I was still, used to the lifestyle of just tradition of like, hey, hanging out with the community, doing what the church does. And it just ended up that the church was, people in church were always in church, and always, on Wednesdays, on Thursdays, on Sundays, on band practice, Tuesdays, like almost every day they were at church. So I guess I was in church every day. So I was doing what they were doing. And so it was kind of that similar thing of Catholic discipleship. It was just like, hey, what's everyone doing? I guess I'll just follow what everyone's doing and slowly get integrated into the church that way, slowly but steadily. So
how old were you? I mean, so I actually would mention this before the podcast, but you went like shift to shift to shift to shift. I mean, there was like all kinds of like major shifts for you. And in a lot of ways, you were very like, not really located in a place or as a person. You were just kind of moving along as kind of the wind blew you, or, for lack of a better way of saying it. But what made you come to the U.S.?
So I was initially was supposed to, and I didn't want to. I was supposed to come visit my mom. And so when I started coming to church, I was actually getting involved in church. I would start going to new believers classes, learning the basics of the Bible, and studying like, hey, you should actually study and read for yourself, and start praying and learning the values of tithing and God's personal relationship, all of these small things. There was this decision like, hey, you know what, you finish high school, there's nothing else for you here, there's no jobs, so go overseas. And so in the beginning it was like, okay, I'll go for 3 months and I'll come back, and I'll come back to church and all that. But after when I got here, it was just a prolonged process of like, now I finally I think it was 3 months or 6 months I was here, then I found out we have different fellowship churches, not just in Fiji but all over the world. And so they're like, hey, we have like thousands of churches everywhere. What city did you go to? And so when we looked up in San Francisco, that's where I ended up moving in the city. This is where I found the church. And so it said, Pastor Dave Ford's church. I'm like, oh, perfect. If this is the exact same thing that, I was a part of back at home in Fiji, let me go check it out. And so that's how I got connected up here in the San Francisco church.
That's right. Yeah. So our church used to be located in San Francisco, and that's when Francois first walked. As a matter of fact, I was there when he first came. You know, it was like, I'm coming up on my 11th year anniversary, and I wasn't even married yet. So I think I was like 23 or 20. I was like 23 when we first met.
Yeah,
so we were both just kids, man.
Yeah, both kids.
That was a while ago. And Francois was like, you were skinny as a rail back then.
I was 17 years old, so that was like 11 or 12 years ago. So
yeah,
that was quite a long time, and
wow,
so
yeah.
That was and I haven't even mentioned of all the tough battles that I had to face as I'm making the decision. As I said, it was a bunch of backlash, and it was like, hey, you cannot go to this church anymore because this is who we are as a family.
Yeah.
And so I had to make tough decisions just in just going to church and attending normal church. My family would rather me actually just go to the nightclubs rather than me actually going to church and learn about God.
Yeah.
So they said like, no, Sunday you need to be in mass. So I had to wake up even earlier, 6, 7 o'clock. Luckily, Catholic church, we have like one every hour. It's just like on clock with 7, 8, 9, 10.
Yeah.
So wake up so early, go to 7 o'clock mass. And then I said, hey, I'm going to party with my friends. So they would rather let me go party rather than go to church. And then so as soon as I finished 8 o'clock, I would go to the actual church where I got saved in Suva, and then go to learn. So service started at 9 o'clock, so we had Bible study and things. So I was going to mass super early in the morning, and then trying to hide like, okay, I'm going to church to actually learn about God and stuff. Yeah. So that was one of the first major battles and the decision I had to make. Like, no, I know this is real. I know this is changing me, and I want to be a part of this. Mm-hmm. And so, that step was crucial.
So Clarissa's asking actually along those lines. You kind of touched on this a little bit already, but she's saying, when you first became a Christian, did you feel automatically that you needed to go to the church that you converted in and stop going to your family's Catholic church?
I didn't like have this decision like, oh, one versus the other. It's just like, oh, this one's better and this one sucks. It was more like, hey, yeah. I've been going to this for 15 years and I didn't learn anything. Yeah. And one night I learned the gospel and salvation in one night. And so I was like, if I wanted to learn much faster pace and I actually wanted to learn about these things, I had to go learn somewhere else. And it was like, if at that time, it's like, if I could learn it in the Catholic Church, I would have gone. Like, hey, teach me about these things. But there is no option of discipleship. There is no sitting, one and actually, want to be closer to God. There was no option. And so that is why I had to go. I went to mass in the morning, and then I went to actual Christian church in the morning and night service just to learn more and to get closer to God, to learn about the Bible.
Why? I'm just curious. We're kind of just sticking on one part of the topic, and that's totally okay. But I'm just curious, what made you, or what convinced you that this was like the right way to do it? You know what I mean? Like what was it that made a difference to you? It was like, what I've grown up following just seems, lacking or wrong, or what made you, what convinced you that this was real or that this was the way to go? And
not to say like maybe even ignorance of what I was trying to learn. I didn't see of it as like, hey, this is wrong, was this right? I thought of it as a continuation. It's like, hey, the Catholic Church has brought me up this much so far, and this is as far as it could teach me. Mm-hmm. After so many years, and I wanted more. It's from that night experience, like, oh wow, there's more. Mm-hmm. I can actually know God, because could jump back to when I was going to Catholic church, and one night as everyone's going out to party right after the mass, I was literally standing outside because I didn't want to go drinking, and all these guys, they were just partying, dancing and stuff, and I walked out. I was looking at the stars. I remember this moment, and I was like, God, are you real? Like I was questioning God at that time in the Catholic church, like, is this really what you want me to do? It's like almost like a conscience, like God's written on my heart, like, hey, are you real? And if this is real, this is what should I be doing? Should I be going mass? Should I be doing these things? And I was questioning that, but not getting an answer. I was like, hey, what's going on? This just doesn't seem right to me. So something inside of me is just like, this does not seem right. Where you just go to church, all of a sudden you just all part of the world. You just there was no thing. It was just like it was just one big life that everyone was living, and I questioned that. And so as this moment hit, it was just answering all those questions that were just, deep inside me. Like, hey, I want to know more. I want to do more. I want to know what God has for my life, and just moving in that direction.
Mm-hmm. So you came to the U.S. and you came to church. And I remember you actually answering the altar call when you came the first time. So you basically, like, I don't know if that was, what was that, like a recommitment, or what led to that decision then?
Yeah. So when I first got saved at the concert, it was, like I said, it wasn't like, hey, I got saved and I was attending every single service. It was more like, hey, I made this decision, I want this, but then I didn't know, like, hey, this you have to grow from here, you have to move from here. And when I went back into the into my life, I just, like, dealing with things in the world and in school and all of these things, is like starting to know, hey, I'm sinning and all of these things. So there was a lot of, like, you would say when you first get saved, it was like 4, 5, 6, 7 months of just like, hey, going back in and out, just like, I want this, but the world is, like, the devil is real, just as much as there was God. So I was getting pulled in every direction, like, you should do this, and like, 1 week and then the next, like, oh, no, it's too hard. It's like, oh, I'm getting, pushed back from my family, I'm getting pushed back by this. It's like, I don't want to cause too much trouble. But then I come back to service, like, oh no, this is real, this is totally worth it. And so there was a lot of, trying to just make a decision. It wasn't just like, hey, oh, this totally, I'll make a decision, disown my whole family and stuff. Yeah, no biggie. It's like, I'll go find another family. Yeah. It's like it was a time of, like, over months and months, almost a year, and just trying to make that decision. When I finally came to the balance of, like, hey, where my dad sat me down and said, hey, 200 years of generations of Catholics is our family, and he brings out our whole genealogy and says, this hairstyle, all the way down. I was just like, and you're the one that is changing this. So, like, all this burden of the world is just, like, put on my shoulders. Like, it's your fault. And he did that on purpose to, like, scare me and just, like, push me. And so I had to make a decision. Like, I'm either all in or all out. And so I was like, why are you so against this? That was my confusion. Like, why are you so against this if this is real? It's like, it's so years later, I finally figured out it's just tradition. It's just, what we are part of as, culture of being from France and the French nation of, this is just what we do as a culture. It wasn't, anything to do with God or church or thing. It's just, you're breaking tradition. Why are you breaking tradition? And so,
I've got the Fiddler on the Roof rolling through my head right now.
Yeah. And so that was one of another major thing where I had to make a decision and said, hey, you're the one breaking all of this. And I had to be okay with that. I was like, okay, well, if this is what it is to serve God, I had to move forward. And so it was a lot of back and forth. And so as I came to the United States, I didn't come straight to San Francisco. I lived, I didn't know anybody. I didn't have nowhere to stay. So I first came to a Fijian family that was in Mill Valley. So I stayed with them. I was going to their church and stuff like that. So it was just all these complications in my life. Like, okay, new place, new family, new church environment and stuff like that. And so, but it wasn't the same. It wasn't the same. And so as I was going, I was, trying to keep the same principles. I was tithing to their church. I was, we were going to church and stuff, but they were preaching the gospel for an hour, but it was just that one thing that was totally different. Where you go back Monday through Saturday, they totally live their lives just like how we used to do in the Catholic Church. I was like, what? There was no difference. It was like it was a whole, like, new experience.
So these were Christians that were living Christians, like Catholics,
but they were living in sin still.
Yeah.
And so, just company being around them, for the first 6 months, that's the life I lived. It's like, this is the people I was around. And so when I finally, it wasn't after like 6 or 7 months that I think Christelle finally sent me the link. Said, hey, I found the church. This is in San Francisco.
Who's Christelle?
Christelle is my wife. And
now.
So, yeah, my wife now. And so Christelle was also the initial one that invited me to church. So she was part of the Suva church. She invited me to the concert at in Suva. And so that's where I initially got saved and said, hey, we have the same experience. So just that alone is just, as people say, oh, you can just go to any church and stuff. That makes a big difference because you don't have to feel like, hey, you're Christian, but what type of Christian are you? What do you believe in stuff? It's just like anywhere in the world where we go as a fellowship, it's the same gospel, it's the same Bible, it's the same Jesus, it's the same lifestyle.
So tell me about that. Tell me about the difference between the church there, and then when you came to this church?
So this comes in answering the question of why I answered the altar call is
Yeah.
because I wasn't living a life as a true Christian. It was because when I first came for 6 months, I was going with this family. The person I was living was the pastor. He was the pastor, and his wife was a pastor as well. So they had just weird beliefs and all these different things, and I was, me being 1 year, maybe 2 years saved, I was just like totally oblivious of. I was like, okay, well, it's Christian, I guess, not Catholic anymore, so it ought to be a little bit better. But it was almost the exact same thing. It was just a different name. We're doing the different things. We're not playing just guitar anymore. It was in the Catholic Church we were playing drums and bass, and so I was part of the band, doing outreaches. We were doing all of the right things. It was just not the right spirit. And Saturdays, all the kids went out to clubs. They were like, okay, I guess we just all going to go to parties as well. And so it was a totally just living in sin still. And so when I finally found the church in San Francisco, the address, and I had to drive 2 hours from where I was living. It was like an hour, 2 hours by train. So to get the bus, train, and all the way, I didn't have a car. Getting there, and then I was like, oh wow, this is the same exact spirit. This is the same experience I had back in Suva the first night when I first got saved in that concert. And so that's when I I have to recommit my life. This is what I want. This is what I was been looking for this whole time, but I just couldn't find it. And so that's where I rededicated my life, got saved again in the San Francisco church.
Very interesting. Yeah. So you're it's interesting that you've gone to a Christian church, you've gone to the Catholic church, but when you came to this church, and this isn't like it's not a plug for the church, but it is interesting. Well, I guess it is a plug for the church, whatever. Unashamed. Bottom line is, it does matter where you go to church. Yeah. And so you came, you felt convicted, and again, felt also inspired to make a decision to become a Christian and live for God. And so how did things begin to change then? Because obviously, the dynamic of the church is different. It was a smaller church you came into, not quite as much activity going on. How did you start? What were like the decisions you started making after that?
Yeah. So, I mean, straight away, as soon as I put my hand up and I made that decision, I knew it's like, hey, this is of the same spirit. It's just like, I felt that, that same call, the same, environment as I first got saved. And so right away, Pastor and Elliot was here during that time as well. And so they invited me to their house for lunch. I was like, so I was going to, go 2 hours all the way back. I was like, oh, just come to our house for lunch. It's like, that's fine. I'm like, okay. And so, the community again is like, I wasn't, a strong enough Christian where I could just, stand on my own 2 feet. I bet if I had just gone back into that old environment, I would just, whatever my environment was, I would just adapt. And so luckily the new church with the new environment, it was just like, hey, this is the life we live. It's not just on Sunday. We live this Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, every day of the week. And so we went over to their house. We had lunch, and so we were just just having a good time, eating food and drinking. We had soda and stuff like that. It's not like a party where we normally, in the Catholic Church we have alcohol, and so we're having lunch. And it's like, oh, you know what? It's time for church again. It's dinner. It's like, oh yeah. So we just went back to church, and so it was like. It almost that was kind of my second home because it was such a long distance. I just stayed at their house. I was always there eating food, and then like, oh well, it's church again. The same dynamics in Fiji. Like, oh, we have a church in the middle of the week. Oh, and on Sunday, oh, we have prayer in the morning and stuff. So just as many things as I could be a part of, I just started integrating there. That's where I slowly and lo and behold, my mom had moved from Sacramento all the way closer to the San Francisco church in Millbrae. And so it was just like, the stars aligned. Oh, perfect. I don't have to go 2 hours anymore. I can just go stay with my mom and come to the San Francisco church. So it was much closer, going to prayer every morning, reading the Bible, getting discipleship, and learning, actually to live a clean life as a Christian. And so that was very essential in building up my Christianity again from the ground up.
Interesting. Yeah. So door opened up for you to just be close to the church then. That's interesting.
Yeah.
So tell me about. Now, I want to kind of like shift into, because you mentioned at the very beginning, you mentioned this idea of like, everything came from the priest. There was like this very impersonal connection with God that was like through the priest and through the traditions and stuff like that. But then you came to the church, and I remember this personally, but you started, developing a genuine relationship with Pastor Ford, who's the pastor of this church. And how did that start? And how did that kind of begin to impact the decisions you made?
Hugely. I mean, that was, as I said, with the Catholic Church, we went see the priest on Sunday, and that's about it. But as I started to come to church and got saved in San Francisco, it was, hey, you're a normal person. You have a life. You had a job. We worked. It's like, oh, you have a wife. You have a family. It's just like, it was just like one of us. It wasn't like, hey, there's this this idol up here that we have to exalt, and the priest, and you don't talk to him and you leave him alone, and his holies there, and you don't talk to him. Where we just had a normal conversation, and we just, like I said, we could go to their house almost every single Sunday and had lunch. And I didn't understand it on my end. I was just like, oh, free food, lunch, like something to do. Where he was on his side, he was like, this is discipleship. He was teaching me. He was like, hey, this is like the way you talk. This is not how we talk. The way you think. This is not how. This is the way.
So he was teaching you English or what?
It was like the language I was using was not different. Like I was using swear words and all just.
Yeah.
It's almost like retraining a child. Like, hey, this is how you walk, and this is how you talk, and this is how you dress, and this is just all the Christian ways of life. And it's just like, oh, okay. Mm-hmm. And so this took time and years, but eventually just molding me into a actual Christian that lived according to the Bible. That was Monday through Sunday was the same person, and learning more of God and getting closer to God in that relationship. How to pray and how to read your Bible and just every single step along the way. People in the church and the pastor was always there to like, hey, if you had questions about work, just like it wasn't just about Christian stuff, and then after no more Christian questions, oh well, there's nothing to learn. It was life lessons as well. It's like, this is how you process life, and this is the Christian way of thinking about life, and this is how you go into your workplace, this is the jobs, this is why we choose certain places to live, and just like everything involving my life where I had to relearn all over again. And it was kind of the perfect example, because I was in a new country, I was in a new place, I was it was just like, all right, I'm gonna start again from scratch. Whatever it takes, if I have to learn it again, I'm gonna start and learn it again. Mm-hmm. And so that's where I started learning and getting discipled.
Was that an easy process?
No, it was a long process. You can ask Pastor if I was an easy or hard person to deal with, but it was many years. I mean, it's been let's say 12 or 13 years now.
Yeah.
And we're still learning every single day.
Yeah.
And so it's been totally worth it.
Yeah.
It's looking back now, I wouldn't have it any other way, because learning these lessons early on is really shapes to the person you are moving forward in life. And everyone in our life will look and it's like, oh wow, how are you advancing so fast? And you're the youngest, and everyone is going down the direction. It's, I don't know. I just made decisions to serve God, and everything was revolving around God. And all of a sudden, my life is just improving on its own by itself, because God, chose us to live this way. And when we live according to God's guidelines and rules, and our life just all of a sudden excels and in the direction where, hey, just the simple things of, you're not wasting time going, partying, wasting money on alcohol and drugs, and we actually, going to work and actually, having savings and learning to be, balance a budget, and just all these basic things of life just, handled itself as I was just seeking God. So it's like, hey, sometimes, it's like, oh man, this is a tough decision. I gotta, try to like, okay, how can I get there? I want to be there, but I'm not there yet. And so, but as I continue to strive in there, my life just continued to just drastically change. And there was a lot of key important indicators where I can look back, like, wow, I made a big decision here that really pushed me forward.
Yeah, I remember when I was thinking about these questions and our history together, because like I said, I was there when you first came to the church and have been there since. There have been tons of shifts in both of our lives, and being able to kind of like go through things together and see things, from the same perspective, different perspectives, experience some of the same difficulties and growth and stuff like that. I can't even imagine if Pastor Ford sat down and told stories about us as disciples from his perspective. Yeah. I might actually do a podcast on that one of these days. Maybe we'll do like a discipleship roundtable where we all just sit down and just ask Pastor Ford what it was like discipling us.
His version of the stories.
I'm sure his version would be pretty entertaining. And there'd be a lot of lessons in it. But so I remember there was another time, another shift Your mom moves. She
Yeah.
leaves. And so now, how old were you when that happened? You were like, what, 19, 18,
Yeah,
19?
I was 18.
So she was only here for a very short time, right?
Yeah, so
And then she moves.
it wasn't much. All of these decisions were happening, 6 months here, 2 months here, 3 months
Yeah.
here. It was just like,
Yeah.
it was just all happening within a year's time. And so I had turned 18, my 18th birthday, and all of a sudden it's like, hey, she loses her job at the Hertz Redwood, which is in San Francisco, and she says, hey, I got to move out of the city now. I'm going to move all the way to Santa Rosa. Back again, 2 hours away. That's by driving. Now without car and train and bus and everything, I couldn't even imagine how far it would be. Then, I was going to church for 6 months or so, and I had to make another tough decision. What am I going to do?
Yeah.
Am I going to move all the way 2 hours and all this progress that I have made so far, just, go find something else? Or am I going to make a decision? And, as I said, when I finished school and all of a sudden this decision opened up for me to come here, that my mom moved to San Francisco when I found the San Francisco church, I continue to take all the credit, like, oh, I just made the perfect decision stuff. I can totally see now God's hand moving in it, just like, it's like, hey, making a way. Your mom's here now, move with her. Oh, your mom's moving out now. Elliot came to me, and Elliot said, hey, my dad's kicking me out. Let's get a place. It was
Yes.
like the perfect timing. So
And where were you living when Elliot said?
I was living with my mom's.
No. You said, because I remember for a minute there you were on your own.
Oh yeah. So before, when my mom had left, I had the opportunity to have a job, and so I was living in my car as well. So I was living in the truck, and so all of this
And
is
where were you
happening.
taking showers and
it was happening very fast.
And brushing your teeth and stuff like
so
that.
it's like I had to improvise a lot of these things. So
He was literally homeless. I remember
Yeah.
this specifically.
So literally homeless in my truck, in the back of my truck, connecting to like free Wi-Fi at the gym, and so I got a membership. I'm like, okay, I'm gonna just wake up, do a workout, use the showers, gym there, then go to work. And so that was my routine. And so I had to wake up early at the gym, and so then I went to prayer right away, because I just live right next to the church. It's like, hey, I don't have to live 2 hours. I just park outside the church and I live there. I'm there for every morning prayer.
Yeah.
And so I was not late. I was early for morning. They just come knock on my truck. Hey, come on, it's prayer time. And so I would be there every morning. And so these are all the times where I can look back and just like all this decisions that I'm making, but also God's hand and said like, hey, here you are. And then Elliot's like, hey, he's looking for a place. And so I made a decision. It was not like a decision like, okay, do I move 2 hours away and lose all this progress, lose this relationship with God, and try to find it somewhere else, or do I go live with Elliot and be closer to the church and then continue? It was a no-brainer to me. It's like, hey, I'm gonna stay at church.
Yeah.
I'm gonna live close to church. I'm gonna take a risk, but I didn't really have the funds for that place. I've never got an apartment by myself. I've never got any of these things, so I had to learn everything for the first time. And so as I'm making these decisions, I made that decision on a Friday. That Elliot said, hey, I gotta sign the lease, and so we made the decision, and I got a call on Monday from someone else. That's when I got offered the job at BMW, and that's like, hey, here's your job, here's your first paycheck, here's the keys for a car. Like, it's just like God just moved instantly. It's just like there was no like, okay, I gotta struggle it out. It's just like God just moved. It's like I made the decision. I'm moving out with Elliot. I had a new job. I had the paycheck. Gave it to him. I'm like, oh, here's my rent for the next 2-3 months. Here you go.
Yeah.
Paid it. Like I'm okay. And here's a car. Here's a vehicle. Just like as soon as I made this decision, I saw God's hand move as well. So it wasn't just like, oh man, is God real? And I saw God move miracle after miracle after miracle. As I'm looking, this is the same time where, this is 2008, this is 2009, recession, where a lot of people are, America's going down. There's a lot of people having a hard time finding jobs and stuff like this. And like jobs just get handed to me. Vehicles just get like, who gets that? And I got a manager job at like with no experience at all at BMW. It's just like, oh yeah, and here's a company vehicle. Like company vehicle at 18 years old at your first job is like, it just doesn't happen. Like I was like, oh, this is cool, America.
Did you have credentials for that kind of thing?
Zero credentials.
I remember specifically asking you, how is it you like learn this stuff? Oh, I just YouTube it. I just Google it. I just Google everything.
That was a lot of my life. Like, okay, now I got to manage this team, and like so it's just like going online, Googling it. it. It's like most of my job was just going online, learning how to do my job, and YouTube, sales, managing, all this stuff is just like, okay, this is what I have to do. I just got to do it. And so, as you know, as I'm saying, I'm thinking this is normal, but everyone's saying like no, this is God, and this is not normal. This is miracles happening in your life. I'm like, oh, awesome.
Yeah.
This is great. This is miracle. I'm more of it. And so just like over and over again, every time I made a pivotal decision, God just moved. And so I was just like, wow, this is great. I'll live this life any day over anything else.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, so I remember it's interesting hearing this stuff because Pastor Ford says you won't want to put that out live, our discipleship roundtable. By the way, if anybody didn't know, that was Pastor Ford responding in the chat section. He's listening. But it's interesting because God's giving you this stuff, and there's no way to look back at our lives and the things God was doing. And I have similar stories, stuff like it's just like, wow, that was totally a miracle. That was totally supernatural. That was not something I did or earned or deserved because I was doing, X, Y, and Z. And I mean, obviously we were doing things and God was responding, but it's interesting because I remember this is kind of it's a funny dig. It's not a bad dig. I remember walking into a restaurant with Pastor Ford and a bunch of other people from the church, and Francois was there, and we're all sitting in line. We're standing in line waiting to be, to be seated. And so Francois sits down at a booth that was nearby and starts eating chips and dip that were at the table that somebody had left from. I mean, it just tells you how raw we were when we first came to this church. We were so raw and so immature and had light years to move. I mean, it was so far to go. And it's interesting because, like I said, those, your relationship with Pastor Ford and asking you how that impacted your decisions moving forward, this idea of personal discipleship became crucial to you, right? And has been crucial for all of us. And I'm sure, Pastor Ford, I think it would be worth it actually to have a discipleship roundtable like that, because it really does give hope to other people. Hey, listen, here's not only people who have at least moved, some distance, we're not where we were then. I'm sure we still have a lot of areas Pastor Ford's looking at it that need major improvement, but that's the job of a pastor, isn't it? To see the things we're not looking at and to help us move through them, and to see that, I can be, a kid with no experience and absolutely no grasp on life and sit with somebody or be with somebody who would help me move forward. That's why Jesus said, we've talked about it. We talked about with Elliot. He said, "Follow me, and I'll make you fishers of men." What does that even mean to somebody who's a fisherman? Fishers of men. What do you mean by that? How do you grasp that? Okay, got it. All right, plan set for the next 30 years. I'm going to be living for God as a fisher of men. Okay, so what's a fisher of men? What I mean? Like, how do you grasp that? He gave them something they could relate to, but at the same time, they had so far to go. And in 3 years, what Jesus did in these disciples was nothing short of miraculous because of who they were and how they responded and the crazy, stupid things they did and how immature they were. It really is a testimony of how God works in people that say, this is what I want. This is what I want. I want to live for God. I want to do what God wants me to do. And so tell me more, like how did you, so you ended up getting jobs, money. I remember, Pastor Ford used you as an example so many times in sermons because of all the miracles God was doing. It's very clearly not your experience level that was getting you these jobs. Yeah. It was like, okay, one job, door closes all of a sudden. Just like a second later, another job opens up. Yeah. Tell me more, like lead me up to like when you ended up getting married. How did your relationship with Pastor Ford, how did your discipleship impact the decisions you were making moving forward?
Yeah, it was everything. Like I would say, it's almost not even like, I would say he was helping more, discipling our lives more than actually, teaching us spiritual things, because he was just like, hey, come to church on Sunday, we learn about the Bible, and then most of it is just like, hey, knuckleheads, don't do this, and don't do that, and don't do that. It's like 90% of it was just how to live our lives. Like, hey, don't eat from this. This is how you do this. Just like almost just like how our father or dad would do, like, hey, this is how you do this, and this is how you do that. And so every step of the way was just like, okay, hey, I got this job. Is this a good thing or bad thing?
We needed milk.
Okay, yes, okay, good. Hey, I got my first paycheck. What do I do with this? It's like, hey, I got this. This is, it's just every decision is just like, yeah, left or right. It's just like, okay, go left here. Okay, look, I made a great decision, guys. It's like nothing to do with any of my experience. It's just like, hey, it's like God has put a shepherd in our life, a pastor that just can make years and years of experience decision into our life as if we were like, 30, 40 years of experience, and I'm making a decision within the 40 years experience. Like, oh yeah, I'm going to make this decision because it's the right one. Because I wasn't making the decision. I was just like, hey, this is what I have to deal with. Should I go left or should I go right? Should I pick this or should I pick that?
Yeah.
And so there's countless moments where, everyone's like, oh, you got married so young, 18. It's like, you got married because you were dating pastor's daughter, Clarissa, at that time. And so we went to your wedding. Right after you got a wedding, I don't know if you remember, I asked you this question: how do you know when you're ready to get married? He said, so Jordan just said, just do it. It's like, there's no thing, you just know, you just do it. I'm like, okay, just do it. So I flew back to Fiji and proposed and got married. It's just like, it was just a decision like that of like, hey, is this what you do? Okay, I'm gonna do it. And so, decisions of jobs, of finances, of marriage, of just every step along the way, just like, hey, how do I do this? This is how you do it. Okay, we'll do it. And just being open to that decision of like, okay, flew back, came over here, got married, and then just time after time after time, there's so many points in my life I can look back and just like financial blessing where God, just moved. Yeah, I can see through my entire life. Christelle was like very new. This is just like we were raw coming from Fiji, and so as I came back from Fiji, I lost my job. So it was like okay, I'm trying to find another job. It's like now I can look back again, see what God was doing. I got to spend 6 months or like a year at home with her, just like showing her, hey, like this is where we go buy groceries, and this is how we do laundry here, and this is like, and like I just had a year off, and like so God's just like, as soon as she was acclimated to America, it's like got another financial breakthrough of another job, and it was just like constant things. I can look back so many decisions. When we first had our first child with Giselle, she was born and she wasn't breathing. And so just stepping back and just praying for her and just say, hey, you know what? Speaking in tongues, I have no control over this. This, it's like this is our first child, and now she's dead. And so I just sat back like, I don't know what to do, freaking out, all the doctors going around. I just prayed, God, you've moved before so many times. Please move again. Mm-hmm. And boom, miracle. She comes back to life as the doctors like don't know what the heck they're doing, and they're just like, okay, she's crying again, like, and they just all start, 5, 6 of them, doctors just walk out the room, total silence. No one wants to say anything. Nobody knows what just happened. That I just experienced. A miracle just happened. That's what happened. Yeah. She was once dead and she's alive again. It's just like, me and Christelle were the only ones in that room can actually, testify to this day. It's just like, every single step of our life with our children, with our jobs, with our work, with every single step. It's just God, just like, hey, you make a decision and God moved. And so I could say countless miracles over and over again. When I made a crucial decision, God was right there to help along the ways.
Did you ever experience that in the Catholic Church? Miracles, God moving? No,
not once. And that was the big deciding factor where, oh, maybe I should go back to the Catholic Church, or maybe it's, very similar. They talk about Jesus dying on the cross and God and stuff like that. But never in my entire life have I personally prayed for people and I've seen them, walk. We've gone downtown and this guy was in his ankle, wrapped all up, me by myself. But this is what Pastor taught us, like, go boldness. The Bible says, pray for the sick and they'll be healed. I was just, okay, let me lay hands and pray for him. Boom, all of a sudden he's like, are you a magician or something? All the pain's gone in, he's walking, he takes off his brace. I'm like, this is miracles, and it's never happened in my entire life. So that's how I can say without a shadow of a doubt, God using my life through miracles, through healing people, and entire through my life, it's just over and over and over and over and over again. And so there's just no doubt. It's just like, hey, God's moved, and I've never experienced this, and so continue to still want more of God and get closer and share that through discipleship. And now is the next stage of like, hey, wanting to have more and more people learn about this and know God is real, and this is why we do what we do, is just to share the good news. That's what God is. Disciples, go into the city tops and just shout, God is the gospel. This is what we do, and continue this legacy of just doing this for other people over and over again. Mm-hmm.
So in the last few years, like what so we're talking, many years ago, but in the last few years, how's God kind of, progressed your life? You're married, you've a couple kids now, and you're a few kids, and you've built a level of success, and you own your own company right now, and you're it literally is quite night and day from when you first moved to the U.S. But tell me, like, how is God moving in your life now? What is your relationship? So I asked you about what your practice looked like in Catholicism. What does your practice look like in Christianity now?
Yeah, so like you said, it's night and day from where I first came here to where I am today, like, 10 years later. And so each and every step I could see, as I shared more in this conference, we came back in June. It's not that it's like, okay, now something new, like, oh, this new thing that God's doing, and this thing that no one's ever heard before. Now that we've like experienced what God has for us, okay, miracle healing, prayer life, Bible reading, knowing more, is just going deeper now. And so now in each step of like now a discipleship, like, we've over the years we've prayed with people, we've had Jose and Jesus and all these people from San Mateo come and just like trying to disciple people, trying to learn, trying to teach, like, hey, while I'm learning, I'm trying to teach you as well the same thing, and just trying to now is actually going deeper and another step. And so I believe as we look at our church today, we've come so far. It was just like the building we have and of the people we have in our church is just all the testament to what we've gone through all these years. But now I can definitely see the next step is discipleship, and just everything we've learned, and the deeper we're getting relationship with God is we need to put that into other people and just show people that, hey, there's no what was that book, is the Stairway to Heaven. It was just like a step after step after step. It's just like as we come to the point, it's like, okay, you read the whole Bible, reading it again, and reading it again and reading again, just like, what is there new to learn about God? There's more as we go deeper in God. And so it's not like, oh, I found this new way to pray and this new way to speak in tongues and stuff like that. It's like, no, now I've just found a more intimate level with God, and just going into that, especially this conference coming back. And I just came back from Fiji as well. There was another conference going on there. As soon as I came back, same momentum as I'm preaching, as I was telling through my sermon, through my testimony from the conference. I came back and I sat down, and the sermon was exactly the same as they were preaching about the Holy Spirit, and go back into your churches, talk about the power of the Holy Spirit, talk about the gifts of the Holy Spirit, and that's the first thing for us to preach as soon as I got back. And I can see, like, wow, God's moving still. God's doing this now, today, and wanting us to, like, hey, you can go deeper in my relationship. You can go deeper in your prayer life. You can go. So now, like I said, owning my own company, it's been a blessing. And so my schedule now is totally changed, where I can just, like, hey, I can dedicate time and, resources, and, like, hey, let me sit down and focus on prayer life in the morning. Focus on actually getting to know God, through my Bible reading. In my business, even I'm doing this thing where the business is not just working a job, but actually pivoting my entire company to be around what God's things, like a Christian business would do. How can this benefit the work of God in either reaching people and my employees, or the resources that I get from my company into putting into. So each area of my life, as I'm going, is like, how can this impact for God? How can this spread the gospel of Jesus? How can this further impact? And so everybody, meeting through my entire, connections as I'm going through each and every day, is just like, hey, sharing this into the world. And so now it's just like, it's been amazing. It's just like, there's no like, okay, now I know everything about days to God, and so I'm just gonna sit back and relax. Like, no, there's this next level, and just like deeper intimacy, and then now just deeper in discipleship, and like, oh crap, I shouldn't have said that last time. So now I'm actually know what to say the next time I disciple someone and talk to someone, and growing each step. Like, hey, this is a better way to share the gospel of Jesus to the world. So that's where I'm at today. Yeah.
Very cool. Wow. Right on time. All right. You've heard Pastor Ford talk about that many times, actually, the idea of there just being another level, another direction to go with God, a further with God. And this fact that you can't really like stop somewhere with God and just be that's it. You've learned everything. It's like, there's still so much more about God to know, which is interesting because you'd already met the limits at 15 years old in Catholicism.
Yeah.
You met the limits. You're there. Do I want to become a priest? Nope. Okay, I guess I'm as far as I can go.
Yeah.
You know, and the truth is that really is all religion. That's all religion. There's never like this further with God. You can learn more about a religion, but unless you know Jesus personally, unless you have a personal relationship with him, you can never have that personal momentum going forward. And that's why the Bible describes it like a marriage. This idea of you're constantly moving forward. There's not like this, yep, we've met our moment and our momentum has stopped. Now we just live our lives together. It's like there's constantly growth and constantly moving and constantly changing. And it's interesting because with that comes progress and blessing and favor and God pouring things out. And it really is quite amazing to hear the story of somebody who's converted from religion to a relationship with Jesus, which is what we always talk about. It's way beyond just religious practice. But I wanted to do this specifically because when Pastor Ford's out of town, it's kind of flexible. I get to kind of, I pick the topics anyway, but I get to do something different with these podcasts. And I think over the coming weeks, as Pastor Ford's going to be out of town a little bit, I'm probably going to pull in some other people. I've already asked a couple folks if they're down to do something similar to this, but just to hear the perspective of people who gave their lives to Jesus from, way different backgrounds, all over the place, everything from university to different cultures, to different religions and stuff like that. And I'm thinking of a way to get Otsko to commit to one of these days, but Otsko would hate me for asking, but I'm going to do it anyway. And so there's a lot to look forward to. And on that note, we're out of time, and I appreciate you guys joining us tonight, especially if you join us for the first time. We invite you to come back and see us again next week. But also, we have service tomorrow night. We'll be here. Service starts at 7:00. We open the doors an hour early for prayer. You're more than welcome to join us in person. And honestly, we encourage that more than anything else, to come in person and try Jesus for yourself. Try Christianity. This is not a religious way of living. It's not just some new practice. You can come and God will meet you here, and it'll be supernatural. It's way beyond, there's what he mentioned about this idea of a conviction. He got to a church that operates like a church, and you get there and all of a sudden there's a conviction, a personal responsibility. I need this. Do I want this? And those questions only come when God's moving on you. This isn't something somebody can convince you to do. And so you can come and know that for yourself. You guys will have to deal with me tomorrow. I'm preaching. I get to preach while Pastor Ford's out. And so it's a good thing this is a work of God and not a work of man. I'm dependent on God speaking to me and through me. And so anyway, we'll have a good time. Again, I appreciate you guys coming out tonight. Thanks, Francois, for being here and doing this with me. I know this was kind of spur of the moment, but this was fun. I'm glad I got to ask you these questions and got to give you an opportunity to tell people what Jesus has done in your life. So we will see everybody soon.